In a historic breakthrough, the militant group Hamas has released the 20 surviving hostages who've been held in captivity for 2 years. After being handed over to the International Committee of the Red Cross, they were transferred to hospitals for medical assessment. These images show Eitan and Gilboa-Dalal being reunited with their families earlier today. In the occupied West Bank, meanwhile, cheering crowds greeted buses of released Palestinian prisoners. Israel says it has released more than 1,900 Palestinian prisoners and detainees as part of the ceasefire deal. Now let's cross straight over to our correspondent, Tania Krämer, who's standing by in Jerusalem. Tania, how have people in Israel been reacting to the release of the hostages this morning?
Well, I think it's a very emotional day, and it's still ongoing because, there are more and more images, of course, coming in from those 20 surviving hostages. Almost all of them, they have been now brought by helicopter to different hospitals in and around Tel Aviv. They have been reunited with their families. And, of course, there were all these videos emerging, from the first encounter they had, being able to hug their loved ones once again after 2 years of captivity. And, there has been a lot of joy. We've been at a gathering this morning where people were watching this on screen when those now former hostages then appeared there when they were handed over to the International Red Cross. So there's a lot of joy and relief, but there's also, of course, grief, because this is not the end of it. There's still 28 hostages, deceased hostages, and they still need to be released. Somehow we just heard from the Qassam brigades, the military wing of Hamas. They said that they will release the bodies of 4 deceased hostages later today. They didn't give an exact timetable, they just gave the names. So this falls really short of those 28 that is part of the agreement that should have been released by today. But Hamas had already said that they might have difficulties to recover, to find all the bodies and remains of those hostages. So we will have to wait and see, when this handover will take place.
Now, the hostages who were still alive in Gaza were released as part of a larger deal with Hamas that includes the return of Palestinian prisoners. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And there equally we saw pictures in Gaza, in Khan Yunis, when the buses arrived there with the prisoners, but also in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, where prisoners were taken. They had been taken from 2 prisons here in Israel. And from the Palestinian Prisoner Society, they said that over 1,900 prisoners were released. About 250 of them, some of them were serving life sentences, some were serving lesser sentences for serious crimes, others were held under administrative detention. And then you have this larger group of about 1,700 Palestinians from Gaza. They were taken after the attacks on October 7, and they were held mostly without charge in Israeli prisons. And among them were also some children. Now, also of them, of course, they have been reunited now with their families, and some actually also have been deported to third countries.
Now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in Parliament that he's committed to peace, but at the same time, he's declined Donald Trump's invitation to join the peace summit in Egypt this afternoon. Why is that?
Yeah, he said he won't take up the invitation, officially in a statement. His office said because of the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah that starts tonight until tomorrow. So that is the official, explanation for that. We really don't know too much what are the other reasons maybe behind that. But, I mean, it could go along some have criticized that decision because, he's missing out on taking part in the summit and talking to other world leaders there. But again, we've seen that time and time again that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is not very going forward with talking about the day after in Gaza, despite the fact that this is, of course, part of this U.S. plan, the 20-point plan, and there has been a bit of doubt whether this will move on from this first phase that we are seeing playing out right now to go into the second and more phases about which will then also deal with the more thornier issues like the disarmament of Hamas or the governance of Gaza. So we don't know why he didn't go, but certainly he will miss out on this event.
Tania, thank you very much. That was our correspondent, Tania Krämer, in Jerusalem. U.S. President Donald Trump has welcomed the release of 20 surviving hostages by the militant group Hamas at a speech in Israel's parliament. In his lengthy address to the Knesset, Trump said Monday's events would be remembered as the historic dawn of a new Middle East. Trump said that Israel has, quote, won all it can, and that a deal could not have been reached without the U.S. striking 3 of Iran's nuclear sites. Well, let's listen to some of that speech right now.
The hostages are back. The hostages are back. This is the historic dawn of a new Middle East. This is not only the end of a war. This is the end of an age of terror and death and the beginning of the age of faith and hope and of God. It's the start of a grand concord and lasting harmony for Israel and all the nations of what will soon be a truly magnificent region.
Let's get some analysis now from Hans-Jakob Schindler. He's a Middle East analyst and senior director of the Counter-Extremism Project here in Berlin. Thanks to see you again. We heard Donald Trump there claiming that this is the dawn of a new era for the Middle East. Do you think he's right?
It is a chance of a new Middle East. Already the Middle East is changed from what it was 2 years ago. Both Prime Minister Netanyahu and Donald Trump correctly pointed that out in both their respective speeches, that the Assad regime is no longer there. Hezbollah is the weakest it's ever been. Hamas is definitely the weakest it's ever been. The Houthis are weak, as well as the Iranian regime is very weak. So there is a chance, but there is, of course, no automatism and no guarantee. Today, in a region where nothing is ever guaranteed to go well, today went well. But tomorrow is the real difficult part. How is Gaza going to be administered? Is Hamas truly willing to give up their weapons? They maintain they are not. What is the new vision that Hamas sees itself? Is there going to be more terror attacks by Hamas against Israelis? Are there going to be terror attacks by Hamas outside the region? We had 2 cells arrested in the last just under 2 years here in Germany. So there are lots of unanswered questions to go from what was announced today as the new dawn to an actually different and more peaceful and more prosperous Middle East.
Looking again at Donald Trump's speech to the Knesset, it is an important day, obviously, for the region. The hostages, the 20 remaining living hostages, are now back in Israel. Looking at Trump's speech, what else can you glean from that might give us an idea of where things will go from here?
I mean, clearly he feels he's on a roll. He, for one moment, suggested a peace agreement with Iran, which significantly got reduced applause in the Knesset. He now puts the vision forward, interestingly, already in the 1990s, put forward by Shimon Peres, the then Israeli prime minister, of a economic cooperation as the key to peace. This is very typical for this US president. He wants the Abraham Accords to be expanded, as the US administration, the prior US administration, had been working towards prior to October 7th, and therefore economic cooperation as a driver for peace. Interestingly, the Palestinians got a mention twice. Essentially, he put the choice towards the Palestinian side of finally accepting that Israel is there to stay and that they have to come to some kind of agreement with Israel, and that was left blank. So there are a lot of steps that still need to be taken and a lot of very difficult details to be negotiated out. But it is also clear Hamas is not a willing participant in this. They are not even attending the ceremony in Sharm el-Sheikh. They've given up their ultimate survival guarantee with the hostages, negotiated 250 hardcore prisoners, in addition to 1,700 who were arrested since October 7th, that those 250 had lifelong sentences in prison, had murdered Israelis, both inside Israel as well as in the Palestinian territories. So they are trying to make this into their propaganda victory. They said they're officially willing to give up the administration of Gaza. They have not at all been willing to give up all of their weapons, maybe some of the weapons. So this harder days are ahead. Today is rightfully a day when everyone celebrates, and it should be celebrated. Finally, all the hostages are home, but it's just the beginning.
So still many steps to take in order to really achieve peace, bring peace to the Middle East, or even to Gaza for that matter. How much credit do you think that Donald Trump should be given for this?
At the minimum, I would say Donald Trump took an opportunity where everyone thought this is pretty much where the game is over. This was right after the attack of Israel in Doha, where the Israeli military tried to, on political orders, of course, tried to kill the negotiating team of Hamas. That was the point where many, including myself, thought this is a significant setback. Trump saw, and President Trump and his administration saw this as an opportunity because the strike failed. Israel missed. He took that and then, including during the General Assembly, got himself and his team involved in actually putting this plan together and putting pressure on Israel. However, this would not have worked with the other side, Hamas, being under pressure as well, both by the Qataris and very significantly, first time in the last 2 years, Turkey is at the table. Turkey is one of the key financial hubs for Hamas. They hold part of the purse strings of Hamas and therefore can put a different kind of pressure on Hamas that even Qatar can put, where the political leadership is, where some of the money is, but the management, the company management of the network of international companies that Hamas is running, that is sitting in Turkey. So it's really important to have that country fully on board with making sure that Hamas at least takes some of the steps they promised.
And Turkey and Egypt, I believe, are going to be signing on Hamas's behalf in Sharm el-Sheikh for that agreement this afternoon. Hans-Jakob Schindler of the Counterterrorism Project, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We want to take a closer look now at the aid situation in Gaza with Olga Cherevko. She's the spokesperson for the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in the Palestinian territory. Thanks for joining us today. Olga, tell us, how much aid have you and your colleagues been able to bring into Gaza since the ceasefire began?
Thank you so much, Terry. So yesterday, I actually spent the entire day in Kerem Shalom, where I watched truck after truck after truck of supplies entering and more showing up, more empty trucks showing up to be loaded and for these supplies to be taken into Gaza. I was there with a medical mission, so we were picking up medical supplies with the World Health Organization, and there were other agencies there as well. During the time that I spent there, I saw all kinds of food going in, fresh produce, fresh meat, even frozen meat. There was also cooking gas that entered for the first time in over 7 months. Of course, medication, shelter supplies, and all kinds of items that were able to enter. And we have this plan where we now have 190,000 metric tons of assistance cleared by the Israeli authorities in the various corridors throughout the region. And so we will be focusing in the first 60 days on the most vulnerable people to make sure that they receive the assistance that they need, including food, shelter, medicine, water, sanitation, and things like this.
Much of Gaza has been utterly devastated. How much aid does the territory need? Have you been able to do a proper assessment to determine what the aid needs are in that territory?
Well, you know, Terry, everybody in Gaza is in need of humanitarian assistance. So the needs are absolutely immense. Of course, as I mentioned, some groups are more vulnerable than others, and they need more, and they need different types of assistance. And I think what is important to remember is that this change isn't going to happen overnight. We have a very long road ahead of us that we're committed to stay on. And this is just the beginning of the journey, because we are now able to scale up the assistance that we have been trying to do, and we're reaching places that we couldn't reach before. We're delivering food, we're delivering medicine, we're delivering bread bundles, hundreds of thousands of hot meals were delivered already, and we will continue doing so. And of course, this is, it's not going to be easy, but we have had this plan and we are implementing it without any time wasted.
Over the past couple of years, while the war was raging, Israel sought to push the United Nations out of its leading role in providing aid in Gaza to the people there. Has this changed now that a ceasefire is in place?
Well, as I mentioned, we are gearing up and we are doing assessments. We are pre-positioning supplies. Just today, I actually went to Gaza City, where we visited several hospitals, and we're doing assessments basically on the needs that they have in order to provide for these needs. And I think what is also important is, of course, we cannot solve this issue alone. And we have never claimed to be able to solve this issue alone. This is not a humanitarian only issue. And this is why many other things and many other elements have to be part of this solution. And this, of course, includes commercial sector and other actors. And of course, there are other countries who are present here, and bilateral assistance, and above that, we need adequate funding, of course, to be able to properly address the situation on the ground.
So looking now towards the future, the next weeks and months, assuming that this ceasefire holds, what are your expectations for the international community when it comes to rebuilding the Gaza Strip?
Well, I think what's important is, again, to realize that we have to keep the attention and the focus on Gaza to make sure that it does not become a forgotten crisis because the guns fell silent. Because also no amount of humanitarian aid will replace peace, and it cannot be a substitute for it. So there are these elements that have to be working together. And it's very, very important that the international community keeps their attention on the situation.
Olga, thank you very much for taking time to talk with us today. That was UN spokesperson Olga Cherevko in Gaza.
Thank you, Terry.
Well, U.S. President Donald Trump has left Israel after delivering his speech there this morning at the Knesset, and he's now on his way to Egypt for an international summit to mark the Gaza ceasefire. Trump is set to lead the event, dubbed a Summit for Peace, with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in the resort of Sharm el-Sheikh. Meanwhile, presidents and officials from more than 20 countries have begun arriving. President al-Sisi is there to greet various leaders who back the deal, including French President Emmanuel Macron, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Turkey is expected to be a key player in follow-up negotiations with Hamas. Well, let's bring in Karim El-Gawhary here. He's a journalist based in Egypt, and he's in Sharm el-Sheikh covering the summit on Gaza. Karim, Donald Trump and many other world leaders are there attending that summit today. Are there likely to be any concrete results coming out of this meeting?
Well, Donald Trump just flew behind me a few minutes ago. Afterwards, we had like a bunch of Egyptian fighter jets making a show in the skies of Sharm el-Sheikh. So the meeting officially started now. There will be nothing that is negotiated or no new results. It's rather a confirmation of things already agreed upon, and that is, we're talking about the first phase of the ceasefire agreement. And those ones we saw today was the beginning, was the release of the Israeli hostages, then the release of the Palestinians in Israeli prisons, and then we'll continue, of course, hopefully in more humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. All that, I think, what the main purpose of this meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh is to give impetus, to give backing, international backing to this first phase of the ceasefire. And I think what is very important for the Egyptian hosts, but also I think for the states like Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey who helped to mediate this first phase, is that Trump is going to stand here now and publicly say that he is guaranteeing that this is a permanent ceasefire. This is the end of the war. Because one of the fears on the Palestinian and the Arab side is, of course, that once the hostages are all released, that the Israeli offensive might continue. And so to speak, this meeting here in Sharm el-Sheikh is basically there in order to publicly say that's really the end of the war.
Well, as you say, this is just the first phase of the agreement. There are 20 points in that agreement. France's President Emmanuel Macron says that delegates at that meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh will be trying to set up a framework to demilitarize Gaza and to disarm Hamas. What more have you been hearing about that?
That's basically looking into the future. That's anything agreed upon yet. It's written in the basically Trump plan, but details are not discussed about it at all. So we can see that many things are still ahead of it. This is the most complicated issues when we talk about disarming Hamas. How is this going to go about? And when we're also talking, that's very important that's the important thing for the Israeli side. The important thing for the Palestinian side is another thing that is written in the Trump plan, and that is that this all should end in a process that finally ends in a Palestinian state. That's something that especially the Arab states and Turkey are going to push for, while the Europeans are pushing more for the disarmament of Hamas. So everyone picks their reasons here for the future negotiations, but in reality, none of it is agreed upon.
Hamas is not present at that summit in Sharm el-Sheikh where you are. I understand their signature on the agreement for this peace process is going to be delivered by Egypt and Turkey. Has Hamas given any indication of its position on today's gathering?
Well, basically, neither the Israelis nor Hamas is present. That was just one of the curiosity of this meetings, that the two opponents are not present here in this meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh. There was some talk that Netanyahu might come with Trump, that then was taken back. Hamas itself actually welcomed this meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh. And one of their main arguments was that they said, basically, what we want out of this meeting is that a guarantee from Trump that the ceasefire is really going to hold, because that is the biggest fear of Hamas, but also the biggest fear of the Palestinians, frankly, in the Gaza Strip, that their misery, as it is big enough without the weapons, is going to end.
Karim, thank you very much. That was journalist Karim El-Gawhary in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan will also attend the summit in Sharm el-Sheikh. Turkey played an important role in brokering the ceasefire deal. DW correspondent Julia Hahn is in Istanbul and is following this story, of course. Julia, President Erdogan will attend that summit in Sharm el-Sheikh. What role is Turkey playing in this peace initiative?
Well, Turkey played a key role in brokering that first step that is a ceasefire for Gaza. President Erdogan will be in Sharm el-Sheikh today with his foreign minister Hakan Fidan and Turkey's intelligence chief. From what we understand, it was him, the intelligence chief Ibrahim Kalin, who, together with negotiators from Qatar and Egypt, helped convince Hamas, or rather pressure Hamas, into accepting Donald Trump's peace deal. I think Turkey has received public credit not only from Trump for their efforts, but also from European leaders. As we know, Ankara has close ties with Hamas, particularly to its political leadership. Turkey does not view the group as a terrorist organization, unlike its Western allies. That has somehow sidelined or eliminated Turkey in the earlier stages of the war from playing the role of a credible mediator, at least in the eyes of the Israeli government. But over the past 2 years, many things have changed, and Erdogan said that during his recent meeting with Donald Trump at the White House, Trump asked him to help convince Hamas take the deal. Now, today in Sharm el-Sheikh, the mediating nations are expected to sign a document guaranteeing the agreement, Qatar, Egypt, but likely also Turkey. President Erdogan is expected to hold a speech, and then I hope this will provide more insights into where he sees Turkey's role in Gaza's future, particularly when it comes to security, of course, but also to the colossal tasks of humanitarian aid and reconstruction.
So we have a ceasefire of sorts in place now. We have the exchange of prisoners and hostages, which is a huge step. But the peace plan that Donald Trump has put forward together with others, it has many points to it. Assuring security in Gaza is an important one, obviously. How might Turkey contribute to that, Yulia?
Well, a few days ago, Erdogan said that he hopes Turkey will be part of a multinational task force that helps to implement the peace agreement on the ground. That was widely interpreted as him saying Turkey is ready to contribute troops on the ground, but no details on this have been provided. We've also heard positive messaging there from the Turkish Defense Ministry, as, of course, there are plenty of security-related tasks there in Gaza, setting up training, a Palestinian police force, the disarmament of Hamas and the like. But as I said, not many details have been released on numbers or anything of this sort. Erdogan has always emphasized that he's also ready to help reconstruction, international reconstruction efforts in Gaza. And I do think this is also what people here in the country expect from him, because solidarity with the Palestinian people runs very deep here in Turkey, a majority Muslim country. And we have seen many protests and demonstrations over the past 2 years in support of Gaza, but also against Israel. But as many experts in the show have already pointed out, there are many open questions and potential sticking points. So this is, of course, what we are waiting for now, is to hear more details on Turkey's future role in this peace plan.
Yulia, thank you very much. That was our correspondent, Yulia Hahn, there in Istanbul.